People often ask me, what was it like to be a POW for 6 years? Well, the physical and mental abuse was barbaric and oftentimes medieval. And in addition, we lived in an environment of constant deprivation and fear. And given those harsh types of conditions, the next question people logically ask is, how did you survive all those years in captivity? Well, for me, the answer is really quite simple. It was hope and the American promise. I never gave up hope that the American people had not forgotten me. I never gave up hope that my country would someday come to get me. And that hope was born out of the American promise. The American promise that we do not forget our brothers and sisters, and we do not leave anyone behind. That promise is ingrained in the culture of our military. For instance, the USO flag has the motto, until all return. In my own branch of service, the U.S. Air Force, the Airman's Creed says that I will never leave an airman behind. And on the POW MIA flag that you see behind me and on this POW MIA patch on my chest are the words, "You are not forgotten." Now, do you think that promise and those statements are time-worn cliches, or do you think they're real? Well, let me tell you, from my perspective, they are very real. This promise saves lives. This promise is important for morale, and it is very critical for survival when you're in the type of situation that I found myself in Southeast Asia. I'm also asked often, what was the hardest part of being a prisoner of war? Well, I think in the long run, the answer to that question is the fact that you have no contact with the outside. You have no communications with your families or your relatives. And it brings to mind a Veterans Day in 1969 when I was sitting in a jail cell in Hanoi with 3 other prisoners. And quite frankly, we were wallowing in our own self-pity, downtrodden because of the misery we were suffering, when all of a sudden, one of my cellmates spoke up and said, "You know, we are really lucky." And the rest of us said, "Lucky? What are you talking about?" And he said, "Well, just think about it. Look at us. We may be miserable, but we're alive. And we know where we're at, and we know how we're doing. But think about the families. They don't know where we're at. They don't know how we're doing. And in fact, they don't know whether we are dead or alive." And people don't think about the families. What you have to remember that when we as veterans serve, our families serve along with us. And so when we remember the veterans, we need to remember the families as well. I didn't have direct communications with my family for over 3 years. I didn't know it at the time, but I did find out later that, in fact, my family did not know whether I was dead or alive for 3 years. It brings to mind another day in Hanoi. Happened to be February 14th of 1970. A guard took me to an interrogation cell, and an interrogator asked me if I knew what American holiday was today. And I told him, yes, today is Valentine's Day. And he said, "In honor of your Valentine's Day, I am going to allow you to write a letter to your wife or your sweetheart." Well, I was not married at the time. And I was quite sure that any sweetheart that I might have had at the time I was shot down had probably long since abandoned me. So I told the interrogator, well, as you know, I don't have a wife, but I do have a sweetheart, and I would like to write a letter to her. Because even though I didn't, I was not about to pass up this opportunity. So he told me, well, all you have to do is tell me the name and address of your sweetheart, and I will allow you to write a letter to her. So I told him, my sweetheart's name is Butter. And we didn't call her by her name. We usually called her by her initials, which were PN. And I always called her by her nickname, which was Skippy. So her name is Skippy P.N. Butter, and her address is in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. Well, you see, as a farm boy growing up in Hunterdon County, New Jersey, we always had a jar of Skippy peanut butter sitting on the kitchen table. And I had long since memorized the address of Skippy Peanut Butter in Englewood Cliffs, New Jersey. So I took pen in hand and started to write a letter to Skippy that started out, Dear Skippy, I love you very much. I miss you very much. And I especially miss the times we spent together dining at the Ritz. And I hope that someday in the future, I'll be able to relive those experiences with you. And I continued on and I signed it, Love, Joe. Well, I was never quite sure where that letter was going to end up. But in the last 2 years of my captivity, I finally started to get some packages from home. And in every one of those packages, there was a jar of Skippy peanut butter and a box of Ritz crackers. So you can't imagine what that did for my morale. That was one of those feel-good moments in a very dark time in my life. And I knew that even without a letter direct to my parents, I had made a connection with them unbeknownst to my captors. So communications with your loved ones is important, and no more so than when you're deprived of it the way I was. In the latter years of our captivity, we eventually started to learn about something that the American people were doing that gave us a boost in morale that you just can't believe. And that's these little silver POW MIA bracelets. We found out that people were wearing bracelets with our names on them. Now, I've got hundreds of these bracelets that have been sent to me through the years. In fact, I'm still getting them. I never throw them away. I keep them as a reminder of the fact that the American people were concerned about me and were thinking about me. And I also keep these as a reminder of all those brave souls who were not as lucky as I was and made the ultimate sacrifice of their lives in defense of this great country. So today we're celebrating Veterans Day. And I believe that every day is a day we should remember our veterans and their commitment and sacrifices in defending the freedoms of this great nation. And every day is a day that we should thank them and their families for their service. Today is Veterans Day, a day we celebrate our veterans, both past and present, and we bestow upon them the honors that they deserve. And Veterans Day is also a day that we reaffirm that promise to them that no one is left behind. That promise resonates deeply in our armed services. We must keep that promise alive because we must keep alive the hope that is instilled by that promise. And we must never forget the sacrifices and the people who have made those sacrifices, both veterans and their families. I'd like to take just a few moments to thank the Hunterdon County and the county commissioners for awarding me this medal. I received it in the mail and not in person because of the pandemic that we have been experiencing. But I want to thank everyone involved for allowing this to happen on a virtual basis and allowing me to speak to the veterans of Hunterdon County and anybody else who is listening on Veterans Day. Thank you very much.